Wednesday. Eat well, think well, move well, sleep well. Wellness Wednesday.
Hey everybody, Dr.Mani Saint-Victor here, and this is our new Health is Love podcast called Wellness Wednesday. So I am your host, Dr.Mani Saint-Victor. I'm a family medicine physician in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I have Dr. Manny. You want to introduce yourself to everyone?
Hi, yes, I'm Dr.Mani Saint-Victor. I like to consider myself a psychiatrist turned entrepreneur / hypnotist. I do a lot of coaching around mindset, but I use a lot of the NLP and language tools just as opposed to having a medical bent, as opposed to having a pharmaceutical bent.
Exactly, yes. So today I wanted to talk about, on that, like, that's exactly why I brought you here, because, a lot of people know us as doctors. They always say that we're trying to push medicine on people and that sort of thing. And that's not true. Like, as a family medicine physician, I know all types of ways to help manage different problems, such as meditation, all that sort of thing. Sometimes people just don't have access to those sorts of things, or they're just not open to it because they've just never been exposed to it, or they tried it and maybe it didn't work. I'm putting my pronouns in there. So, for me, it's just an interesting thing because people assume a lot. Everybody always is like, oh, traditional Western medicine doctors don't know anything about anything. And I'm like, I'm a family doctor. Like, family doctors, I took integrative medicine elective when I was in medical school. I took an integrative medicine elective when I was in residency. A lot of one of the faculty in our department right now does acupuncture. I think two of our faculty actually do acupuncture. So I've been exposed to a lot of integrative medicine things. We actually have a integrative medicine center in this part of our department as well. So people just assume a lot. They don't ask a lot of questions. So it's a very interesting thing because, it's like a difference in expectations. A lot of times we don't really know what the patients are expecting of us. Yeah. And we don't know that that's what they're interested in. And they make a lot of assumptions and vice versa. Sometimes, we could offer somebody, but I generally will offer people different things, like different options and that sort of thing. So yeah.
I think they have a hard time knowing what's available and even the amount of details they get for stuff. Because,
right.
You get a lot of marketing for medications. You won't so much get marketing for meditation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what's hard. And that's honestly one of the things I wrote in my first book, Health is Love, was that one of the things that was interesting about when we moved into this house, we've been in this house for about 6 years. We have about an acre and a half of land, which is amazing. But because we have an acre and a half of land, we have our own garden. And so in Ohio, like, tomatoes and cucumbers are very prosperous. Apparently Ohio is the #1 producer of tomatoes in the whole country. Which is like more than California, which surprised me, because they probably just need a lot of water, and I don't know if they can get as much water in, California. So, but we grew so many tomatoes and so many cucumbers, and I had to figure out what to do with them. So I was just like, we have all these cucumbers.
That sounds like a business model. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But so I just started eating cucumbers, and I'm just like, you can just eat a cucumber, and it's very filling. And I just eat them for lunch. Yeah. And I was like, but there are no commercials for cucumbers,
You will not see a cucumber commercial.
So it's just an interesting thing, but that, people, because of that, commercial and capitalism piece of it, there is a difference in expectations and marketing, because now everybody's, coming in asking for those new weight loss drugs. So that's been the biggest thing right now. So, all right. So let's introduce the topic and transition there. So I wanted to talk with you about tips for better sleep, because I am a person who, especially in medicine, I feel like we ourselves do not always value the importance of sleep, because the way our medical training is and our profession is, we are often sleep deprived, and it's kind of just accepted. And so for probably all of residency in the first few years of my career, I didn't sleep for basically 7 years. And I realized after the fact it was probably because that that it was because I actually got an IV place right before I started residency. And so it was helpful because it helped me survive residency, I'm sure, and like be able to stay awake and that sort of thing. But at some point, I needed to sleep and just had a lot of insomnia. And so over the years, I've learned a lot of different ways to manage that insomnia. Like I cope very well with it. Like I would just get up at like 4 a.m. and go to the gym and work out. And that actually helped me like sleep at night and that sort of thing. So tell me about your experience with insomnia.
Well, that's like my life story. Like you said, throughout medical training in med school, well, even in undergrad. In undergrad, I had a good bit of depression. And as a result, most of my nights I would stay up worrying. I was worried. I would stay up at night thinking about death and thinking about failure just for a long time. By medical school, I would work myself to exhaustion, collapse, and then basically wake up as soon as I can, as soon as I could, and get right back to studying or whatever. I just, I got to the point where, I would play audios in the shower so I could study. So sleeping was almost perceived in my group almost like as a weakness. We have a big bottle of Mountain Dew. We just go, nap there. By the time I got to residency, the call schedule, the call schedule doesn't care about your sleep cycle. And overall, I just, I took a lot of breaks during my training. So by the time I was in residency, I was thinking my mid to late 30s, and I had spent my whole life just with these bad sleep habits. It was just so I couldn't conceive of healthy sleep hygiene. It wasn't until I'd say about a couple years ago, I just decided to go all the way super healthy. I had been doing meditation before and been doing hypnosis, but I decided to go ahead and apply the stuff that I was helping my clients with to myself, and started opening myself up to dreaming, to the point where instead of spending the whole night worrying about getting to sleep, I spend a lot more time dreaming. And even if it happens to be a nightmare, I'm okay with that because I know it's emotional process.
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of things too. Like I think that I always say that there's a type, like as doctors, there's a type that we are, and one of the biggest things that we are naturally worriers, right? Because in order for you to be concerned about other people's health, you have to be just a worrier. So I've been that way my whole life, just worried about this and just a fair amount of anxiety. And I feel like that's kind of what keeps us out of trouble and in the books and, out of jail and that sort of thing, especially where I'm from, So it's just like I probably was more worried about things than most other young people. And so that happened to me when I went to medical school as well. Like I'm sure I had what's called adjustment disorder. For people who are not doctors, there's a such thing called adjustment disorder where you have some kind of life change. And so when I started medical school, I actually got a degree in Spanish. So for a year, my last year of school, I actually could have finished college early. But my last year, I didn't take any science classes because I barely took any classes. Like I basically just drew out my last year because I was applying to medical school. And so when I started medical school, I had this big insecurity that I hadn't taken medical, like any science classes in the past year. So for like 6 months, I was afraid of failing out of school and I couldn't sleep. And and then we learned about adjustment disorder at some point in the second year. I was like, I'm pretty sure I have adjustment disorder.
That resonates, right?
But yeah, for me, like I said, it was like getting off that birth control. I was able to sleep finally. And I was like, and then it's like stuff like that. And for me as a family doctor, I'm like, why don't we screen more people for, sleep disturbances when we start them on birth control? Because we know a lot about we talk about mood changes, we talk about, diet changes and weight and all that sort of thing. But I feel like we don't put enough emphasis on sleep. Yeah. And I know that when I was going through my whole insomnia, situation, I was going to the doctor regularly, like every year, and my doctor never asked me about my sleep. And so now I make a big point to try to ask my patients about sleep and to make sure that it is part, especially during my physicals, which, as a geriatrician, that's one of our review systems as well, a geriatric review system, talk about sleep, pain, all that kind of stuff, bowel movements a lot, So yeah, my physicals, I ask all that similar things. I ask about fall. So, that's why it's important for people to get their wellness exams, because if you are just coming in for chronic care or just for sick care, we don't always have time to talk about, all that other stuff. But even as doctors, like I said, it's just an interesting thing because our culture doesn't always, prioritize sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, the motto at one point I remember was "You can sleep when you die," and we joked about it, but ultimately, even jokes have a little bit of truth to them.
Right. Well, the problem is too, like, so for me as a family doctor, I can tell when people are not sleeping well either. Like I do ask at some of their chronic care appointments because people's blood pressure will be higher. People's blood pressure will be higher when they're not sleeping. Their sugars are higher when they're not sleeping. It releases a lot of cortisol and stress hormones. So I generally, now that I've, more experienced in being a physician, I do ask about it in their chronic care appointments because I can tell when when their blood pressure is higher than usual. I can say, "Did you sleep last night?" And especially some of my retirees, they'll be like, "Oh no, because I was busy doing this or doing that, and I didn't think I really needed to sleep." And it's like, no, actually, it increases your blood pressure. The CDC says that, so this month is heart month, so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to actually talk about it this month. But not sleeping can raise your blood pressure and it can lead to premature death. So it's like people will be like, "Oh, you can sleep when you're dead," but you're like,
make it happen faster. Yeah, right.
You will be dead if you don't sleep enough. So let's move into just some of the things that I'll talk some of the things about why my patients may complain about not sleeping, and you can tell me a few things about your patients. So for me, there's really like 4 categories that I noticed that people fall into when they are having trouble sleeping. So number 1 is, some kind of life change, like that adjustment, insomnia, like I just described. So it might be a death in the family, it might be a new baby, which nobody's gonna sleep with a new baby anyway. Or it might be a new job, or just feeling stressed out about your job. Just a lot of different life changes. So that's, one of the things. Number 2 is hormonal changes. So like I said, for me, being on birth control, but I see a lot of people around perimenopause. So perimenopausal hormone changes. Teenagers are having a lot of hormone changes. Pregnancy, of course, pregnancy and postpartum can cause a lot of issues with hormone changes and not being able to sleep well. And then there are a couple more reasons. A lot of them are medical reasons, like anxiety, depression, which which I consider a medical condition. I know a lot of times people, I don't separate, like anxiety and depression are medical issues. Yeah. And sleep apnea is a big thing. Chronic pain is a big thing. A lot of my patients with arthritis may not sleep well because they're in pain. And there's another big category that I'm missing. So I'll think of it, and while you tell me some of the reasons why your patients may not be sleeping.
Okay, you already mentioned anxiety. That's a big one. Rumination, something that keeps people up. And actually, a lot of times people have trouble sleeping because they're trying to force themselves into sleep. And sleep is not something you can force yourself into. Sleep is something they call passive volition. You have to allow yourself to sleep. Another big factor is relationships. A lot of times people are in a relationship where they're not comfortable with each other, yet they're sleeping next to each other. That changes the dynamic. Sometimes people in relationships where they don't feel safe. A lot of cases, people have scary and dark stuff going on at night, in family dynamics. Unfortunately, that comes into play. You get medicine side effects. A lot of the psychotropic meds, even in addition to someone having sort of an irregular set of cycles, the medicine is helping their mood, but the medicine is dysregulating their sleep cycle. Right. What are some of the other things? A lot of people, they have like third shift jobs, unfortunately. Yeah. And third shift jobs, people think they adjust to that, but ultimately you're not getting enough sun. You're not getting enough human connection, except for your co-vampire friends. Ultimately, there's a part of society, part of life that you're not, a rhythm that you're not connected to, and what goes with that. So those are some of the few financial worries. Yeah. Those are worries, but financial worries. Those are the main things I could think of right now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then the other thing that when you were just talking, it made me think about I was trying to multitask, but I failed. So I just wrote an article about this. So check that out in the Cincinnati Herald. Oh, the third one was just poor sleep hygiene.
Yes, I was just thinking that. Yeah.
Yeah, so poor sleep hygiene. So that's kind of some of the, what I want to talk about today, like how I work on my sleep hygiene. So yeah, basically that's just things you actually control. Like some of the other stuff, such as, just life worries and being stressed out, you don't really have control over that. You don't have control over your hormones changing. For the most part, like I said, unless it's birth control and you notice something like that, then maybe you could consider something different, or even like get some medicine to help balance out the side effects of that as well, because that's basically a side effect if you're on, like, I had an IUD for 7 years. So if you're on IUD and you have insomnia on it, then you can, get another medicine to help you sleep, like hydroxyzine or something like that. That's probably what I should have been doing for those 7 years. So, it's, for me as a geriatrician, often we'll say like, well, discontinue the medicine instead of start another medicine. But for a young person like myself, who was just trying to make it through the world and not have a child before I was ready to,
yeah, that part.
It was it was kind of like, well, I would have taken another medicine to manage it. So, and then, there's just a lot of, like, I don't know if I mentioned, did I mention sleep apnea? Sleep apnea is a really good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so and it's hard because a lot of times when people's blood pressures are really high and I'm trying to control their blood pressures, that's generally when I will find out that people are having sleep apnea issues. I'm like, your blood pressure is really high, and I put you on like 3 medicines and it's still high, so maybe we should send you to get a sleep study. So
yeah, especially the undiagnosed sleep apnea, where all they know is they snore, or if they live alone, they may not even know the kind of noise they're making and the kind of difficulty they're having with those apneic events.
Right. And I guess the other piece that we didn't say when you were talking about partners is that sometimes people may not sleep because their partner snores. So partner has sleep apnea and they're like worried.
Like, you've been talking to my wife? What?
No. So it's just, an interesting thing as well. And that's one of the things for my husband and I. We've been together forever. So we have a hard time when we're not in the same bed together. We have a hard time sleeping. Like, if I was in a conference last weekend and didn't sleep well and he didn't sleep well. So it's an interesting thing that way too. So, all right. So let's talk some about, tips for better sleep. So I will kind of give my top 4 tips, things that help me. So number 1 is trying to stay active and eat healthy during the day. A lot of people don't realize that exercise can help you sleep. Trying to get a lot of energy out definitely makes you usually just sleep better at night because you're just tired, your body's tired. So exercise, definitely. And then just eating a healthy diet, because sometimes if I eat like really heavy meals or too much dairy, that sort of thing, I can notice that my sleep is not as good.
Yeah.
And then, so that's number 1. Number 2 is working to quiet my mind, like you were saying, ruminating, that sort of thing. I tend to do that often. I feel like doctors are probably really bad at that. You're like, oh, did I order that lab for that patient? Did I do this? Did I do that? And did I refill those medications? Like, there's just so many things on your to-do list that sometimes, and I'm sure a lot of, like, I don't have children, but I'm sure that's probably a thing with a lot of parents too, with so many tasks. So like any kind of job or responsibility that you have where there's just a lot of tasks, that sometimes can be hard to not ruminate.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I do is I don't have my stuff here with me. I don't know why I forgot I was going to be on camera, but usually I just record these and don't worry about the camera part. But so to quiet my mind, I actually have these nice Bose headphones, and they're called Bose Quiet Comfort, and they're very soft. So I can put them on and I can sleep, like I can fall asleep in them, and I could stay asleep with them for all night because they're very comfortable. So I usually will put on either some soft music, like some Sade or something like that, or Erykah Badu, some kind of like, neo soul music or old soul music that, is nice to just fall asleep. And I make sure that I have a bunch of playlists. I actually have a bunch of playlists on Apple Music. I was doing yoga when the pandemic started. So I made all these yoga playlists. And so I listen to them and try to fall asleep. And they're nice because they usually are about 30 minutes, and then they go off. And then, then I'll just have the headphones on and not listen to anything. So I'll do that, or I will listen to books like Audible. I'll listen to Audible books and put a timer on there, because that's the problem with Audible, is that it could potentially, you could spend like 9 hours listening to a book and you don't even know where you left off.
Yeah.
So I usually will set a timer for about 20 minutes. That usually is about how long it takes me to fall asleep. And then, so those are some things I do to quiet the mind. And then number 4 thing I do is try to stay cool. So I usually sleep better with a fan on me. I've been this way my whole life since I was a teenager. Maybe that's maybe my hormones started, changing around teenage years. I started sleeping with a fan at a young age. So it's nice because it has a good amount of white noise for people who may need white noise to sleep at night. So my husband, he likes it for that reason. He likes the white noise, but also it helps to cool down, especially when you are of a certain age, getting to be close to 40 and those 35. Yeah, like 35 to like 50. A lot of women start having a lot of hormonal changes and just really hot at night. So it's nice to have like 3 fans, all the fans. And the last thing that I do is I try to avoid drinking too much alcohol. So it's kind of interesting. A lot of times people will be like, oh, well, I drink alcohol to try to fall asleep. Yeah, exactly. So I drink tea instead. Yeah. I drink caffeine-free tea at night because it is nice to like come home and like relax and have a nice like little wind down moment. But instead of doing that with like wine, and honestly, with 1 glass of wine, I'm okay. It's more like 2, 3 glasses of wine, which you probably really should have been doing anyway. Like as doctors, we know that the recommendation is to have like 1 or 2. But if I have 2 glasses of wine, I'm not going to be able to sleep well. So I try to just even avoid being around it at all. So I just drink tea. I have a bunch of different teas. I was raised by like somewhat like hippie type parents. So if you never could notice, my parents came of age in the 70s. So I grew up on the food co-ops and that sort of thing in the 80s and the 90s when a lot of people were not into that kind of thing yet. But my parents converted to Islam. And so it was just kind of this whole world of like trying to take care of your life, your body better. And, you pray 5 times a day and which is a form of meditation, so it's just that religion spends a lot of focus on just trying to care for your body. So grew up going to food co-ops and that sort of thing and drinking celestial seasoning tea my whole life. So I try to avoid the peppermint tea. Everybody like loves their peppermint tea, which I love it too, but I can't drink it at night because it'll make you too awake. So I usually do either they have this honey vanilla chamomile one that's really good. They have this Bengal spice one. It's kind of like a caffeine-free chai tea. Yeah. So that one's nice. I like sour beers. So I sometimes like sour ones like hibiscus. They have this one called Red Zinger. I think they have a Blue Zinger. So I do, I've made those tips and all of those 4 things really help me sleep well most nights. And then when I do get like around my cycle, even though so I had a hysterectomy about a year ago, so I don't actually have a uterus. So I don't even know when my cycles are, which is weird. But even before I had a hysterectomy, that's a whole situation. But my whole situation with my periods, everything has been messed up forever. But I've started trying to track it because I've noticed that around that like 2 weeks before I would have a period, like premenstrual time, I get a little bit of like my husband is like family medicine psychiatry, so and I know a bunch of psychiatrists because we have a bunch in our department, so I feel like I'll call it being a little hypomanic. Yeah. And I can't sleep, and then I start doing things, like get up and do all, So I actually noticed since I started going back to acupuncture that acupuncture can help with that. So this month, when I know, like as soon as it happened, I text my acupuncture Chinese medicine doctor, like, "Hey, can I get a session?" So I think I went like 2 days with like poor sleep, and then I got in with him, and I've been sleeping well all weekend. So
yeah, I love acupuncture.
It's amazing. It's really amazing. Yeah. So tell me what you do. What kind of things have you learned?
The routine is important. So it took me a while. Like I said, I didn't have much of a regular routine through most of training. My wife is an early sleeper, so I got into the cycle of 8 o'clock, bring the kids up, do their bedtime routine, come in here, wind down. I tend to I still have the device bad habit, so I tend to read on my iPad or on my phone at night, which I know isn't great. One thing we've done though that's been amazing, and I didn't realize it was that much of an impact, is we've made our room like pitch black.
Hmm.
I always heard that light had a negative impact. And so initially we got blackout curtains for our window so that
Hmm.
there's no moonlight, no street lights, no stars, nothing coming in that way. So
Hmm.
then we decided, hey, the front door, sometimes, the kids like to sleep with the lights on. There's a little bit of light coming around the edge of the front door.
Hmm.
So we put a blackout curtain on the front door to cover the edge of the light.
Hmm.
Darker the room got, the better we slept. So we started covering up the TV light, anything charging, all the phones, and we made it pitch black in the room, and it made such a difference. But
Yeah.
when I wake up at night, I bump into the walls, but I've gotten better. um, I once I find my way to the bathroom, lots of trips because I am 50, lots of trips to the bathroom, but I don't wake up. I wake up the next morning and I'm refreshed. I don't get that wake, sleep, wake, sleep.
Hmm.
That's one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
Also,
What about, I didn't say this in mine because forever I've never had a TV in a bedroom. Do you have a TV in your bedroom?
yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. But we tend to, most nights we're too tired for TV. We have it there. But mainly we sometimes one of us escapes because we got 4 kids. So one of us escapes to the TV while the other one is coping with the kids. Yeah. So, and plus our TV, it had a bit of a red light at the
Mhm.
bottom that was on all the time. So kind of jammed the tube sock in front of that. That's part of the furniture because that way, even that little red light was part of against our pitch black. One thing that's important is in terms of when I was in my many depressions, one of the things I find during depression is to override the rumination, I would listen to audiobooks. It had to be audiobooks that weren't too depressing, honestly. I didn't need
Yeah,
it.
or even they're like too exciting where you have to follow the story too much. So sometimes if I listen to books, it's either like something that's, not supercharged,
Something
or I
general.
listen to something old,
Yeah.
something I've already listened to before. So I don't really even care. I'm not interested in it
Yeah.
as much. You know what I mean?
Just some sort of I guess it's basically brown noise.
Mhm.
It's a story I don't want to follow. And I used to sleep great in med school lectures, so sometimes I go to YouTube and find a science lecture, put that on, and I'll be
I
like,
used to do that in
"Ah,
medical school. I used to put on our lectures and sleep.
yeah, that'll knock me out. That'll not. It's like even 8 in the morning, lecture starts. They turn out the lights to show some X-rays, and I'm out. I'm waking up and the lights come back on. Like, did I miss something? So I do that. What else? We tend to keep the room super cold. Even in the winter, we barely use heat. We have the fan
Same.
on, even in the winter.
Keeps your
And
bills
then we have
down too. It keeps your
yeah,
bills low.
yeah,
But yeah, we do the same thing. We keep our house at like 70 degrees year round.
yeah, yeah. And then you can snuggle with a super blanket. We got the fuzzy blanket, and that makes it great. Um, what else? I think the routine is the most important thing. With our routine at night, we wind down. Around 9 something, probably 8 something is quiet time at the home. So less noise, TVs are off, etc. Except unless my wife and I are peeking a little bit. And so usually around that time, I can get some writing in. I like to kind of sit and kind of reflect. My
Mhm.
grandpa used to do this, and I always thought it was the weirdest thing. Where in the evening he would just sit there with his pipe, and sit there
Yeah,
and just sit there.
yeah.
Sometimes in the dark, sometimes out in the balcony. And as I've gotten older, I found that just taking a little time to get an idea of what's going through your mind. And it
Mhm.
doesn't even have to be formal meditation. It's
Right.
just still time when you're not putting in new data. It's a good way to kind of churn through some of the stuff from the day that might be unresolved. Uh,
Mhm.
on the other end, my morning routine relieves a lot of stress
Mhm.
because I know in the morning I won't have to wake up suddenly. So I
Mhm.
can zombie through my first part. I walk in there, I get my meds, I have whatever, some sweats laid out, I throw on the sweats, get the kids off to school, come back, might collapse to finish some sleep. Or, my wife's usually doing yoga. There's a machine that there's not much thinking for the
Mhm.
first couple hours. It's all autopilot. Alarms
Right.
go off, bus time, feed kid time. It's the morning routine. I think is fantastic because it relieves some of the stress. In terms of data, one of the things they found is the cortisol awakening response. How high your cortisol spikes is predictive. If you think you're going to have a crap day, your cortisol spikes higher.
Mhm.
So by making the morning more mellow, more predictable, you can manage that cortisol awakening response and make it less of a spike. Also, in terms of mood management, if you can make your nights peaceful, if you can make your night routine peaceful and regular, what you can also do is in the morning, you're more able to, you wake up in a better mood. And the part of the morning routine is managing your mood. Like I said, at night, you do the wind down where you reflect. In the morning, you kind of get an idea of how you're feeling about your day, what things are stressing you in particular, where you feel underprepared. And instead of just tumbling through the day, you have your day, you break it up to the little pieces and you allocate energy to each of the pieces. And just knowing that that's done makes sleep better for me. Just at night, reviewing my schedule lightly. You know, to me, those are things that I found to be most helpful.
Right. Yeah. No, but I think that what you just said is really important though, because I feel like a lot of people just function in so much chaos.
Yeah.
And people don't really realize you have the power. Most people, obviously, like I said, when you have like a new baby, you don't necessarily have complete control over when the baby's going to wake up and that sort of thing. And even like teenagers and all types of stuff, when you have children, it's very unpredictable. But, it's one of those things where like you set the tone in your house. I'm sure that your children sleep through the night because, you all have created a routine and a sense of peace. Yeah. Because, for me, the opposite of chaos is peace, Yeah. Yeah. But a lot of people's lives are very chaotic. Yeah. And, for us, we've come from a place of privilege of, being people who have paid our dues, and now we can create that peace at home with having like, one job and that sort of thing. But even as physicians, our lives can be very chaotic, So I think that sometimes people, just because we have the financial privilege, doesn't necessarily mean that we're any better about managing our schedules. Like nobody teaches us this kind of thing in school. Like obviously people taught us the opposite. So a lot of this stuff we have to learn. Yeah. And so I think even for physicians, one of the biggest things that people have to figure out is what kind of job allows for the most peace, because currently, there's just, I've quit a lot of jobs. I've said that before. I've had a lot of jobs. I've quit a lot of jobs when I felt like it was too much chaos, or when I felt like it was not peaceful. I've quit jobs, and I have the privilege of being able to find another job pretty easily. Yeah. And I know, but for my parents own their own business. So sometimes people may start their own business or may change careers. So people have the power to figure that out. Like if your life is feeling too chaotic, you have the power to figure out what you need to do to bring that level of order and peace into your home.
Yeah. With me, when I went into business for myself, initially I still had my medical life habits. So I would grind, wake up. As soon as I woke up, I would just get to work, and there was no wake up time. It was just whenever my body allowed me to wake up. I stay up super late. Sometimes I work till 2, 3 in the morning, and then in the morning I had to get up for the kids' school, and then I would work. So there was no routine. Right. When part of the benefit of autonomy is discipline, I like to say, now that I run my schedule, it's important for me to have certain things in my schedule, like try to be consistent about a certain time to eat. Try to be consistent about taking lunch, taking a break, etc. Because like I said, the brain is a prediction engine. Mm-hmm. One of the ways you relieve stress is by letting yourself know what's coming up so that you can allocate the right energy for that part of your day.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that people really, really underestimate the power of sleep, the power of routine, the power of the absence of chaos. Because especially for me, like what's interesting about, being a family doctor and seeing people at different stages of their lives, is just seeing how much people bring chaos into their lives. Like I have a lot of people who are, just trying to be everything to everybody. And it's just like, whatever that people pleasing, pool that they have toward whatever.
Yeah.
But it's just like, at some point, when do you please yourself and have time for yourself and stop running around?
Boundaries are absolutely important, because if you're not effective with setting boundaries, you really don't have control of your day. You don't even have control of your night, because if in our culture, if you allow your med students or your residents to call you at night, they will. If you don't set those boundaries, like do not call me when I'm not at the hospital, and particularly in psych, we teach our patients their boundaries. Yeah. So if you're like, with a lot of my clients, I'm like, you can text me, but don't text me weird. Don't
Right.
flood me with text. And it takes a while to adjust that. So
Mm-hmm.
like you said, the people pleasing, it took me a while to go from wanting to see my people happy at my expense to realizing that ultimately people feel better when you give them boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're like, oh, I know I'm not calling this person when they're in a certain mood. This person, if I'm answering the phone, I want to be talking. If I'm
Right.
texting back during a certain time, it's time that I've allocated to doing those things. So yeah, the boundaries help a lot with sleep.
Right. And it just through the day too, because that's what I learned in residency is I do not like chaos. So I have my phone on. I don't have any notifications on my phone to be like dinging all day. And I keep my phone on silent throughout the day because that would drive me crazy if I heard ding, ding, ding,
Yeah.
ding, ding all day. So I keep my phone on silent throughout the day. And at night, I put my phone on do not disturb after 10 o'clock. Between, I think, 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., my phone is on do not disturb, which I'm not usually sleeping until 7. I usually wake up around, I usually go to bed around 9:30, 10, and I usually wake up around like 5 in the morning or 6 in the morning. So, but yeah, so everybody's different. But I think that's one of the underestimated things that people can do is get rid of notifications.
Yeah.
Turn your phone on silent and put your phone on do not disturb at a certain time. So,
yeah, I think that's super important because especially back in the Facebook game days, when Farmville and Cityville would wake you up all night to check on your berries and at first we're like, oh, it's not that bad, but I can sleep through it, whatever. But we were giving so much power to interrupt our routines to these devices.
right.
Oh, I set my strawberries so in 30 minutes they're gonna ding me. And it's okay. Every 30 minutes you're getting these strawberries and you get these overlapping things. And now you have this farm empire that's literally waking you up in the middle of the night to the point of compulsion.
Right.
So the notifications, email, it's helpful to not check your email right before you go to bed. That's important. Right. I don't check my emails. If you text me after a certain time, I won't see it till morning.
Right.
My
Yeah.
father say if you're dead, if you're dead, there's nothing I could do for you. So I don't need to hear death news at night. It's like you're still gonna be dead in the morning. Let me get some sleep.
Yeah. Yep. Except for when we're on call. So as a family doctor, I have to be on call. At least for now. I hope that one day maybe this can change. I was like, why can't they just have like doctors in Australia take our phone calls like they do for radiologists? Right? A lot of people don't know that. But radiologists, they outsource reading films at night in the hospital. Like, somebody comes and breaks their arm at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
They don't call and wake a radiologist up. They just send it to Australia.
That's brilliant.
So I'm just like, why can't we do that with family medicine? Like Australia has tons of family doctors.
Yeah. Do virtual visits. Yeah.
Right. Like, because most of the time people call us in the middle of the night, they're trying to figure out if they should go to the hospital or not. Yeah. So it's mostly just triage. Like, I mean, it could even be nurses. Like they could send that job to nurses in Australia, because people are generally just like, do I need to go to the hospital or no? And generally, if you're calling somebody to wake them up in the middle of the night, the answer is yes.
Just want, and particularly like when I used to work ER, crisis like ER, a lot of times people would be in there and flat out it was loneliness. It was just wanting to talk to someone. Right. So really they a lot of times they would show up and interrupt your sleep just to make eye contact with someone. You could sense it. They're lonely at home. They're having some sort of episode as a result of being alone and lonely. It's kind of sad.
No, loneliness is definitely a big thing, especially with some of my older patients. They've talked to you about in COVID, the isolation definitely killed a lot of people. Like people die of loneliness. A lot of people don't realize that, but our emotional health definitely has such an impact on our, the mind and, as family doctors, we know the mind and body are connected. Everybody knows the mind and body are connected, but we just started doctors who do a lot of the medicine that deals with both things. So, but yeah, so let's talk about some of the medicine. So as far as sleep, how often do you prescribe medicine and what kind of medicines are you usually thinking about? And then we'll talk after you talk about that. We'll talk some about like other treatments outside of.
I've gone pharmacy. Like I don't prescribe anymore. I don't prescribe meds. Like my clients come to me, mainly I've chosen people who don't need meds, or if they need meds, I send them to one of my colleagues.
Okay.
I've literally stopped prescribing.
And is it because because we haven't talked yet about your hypnosis. Is it because a lot of times you work with your patients in hypnosis and they may not need them anymore? So tell me more about that.
Yeah, I've moved to a model where I got really, really into Ericksonian hypnosis because so many things could be controlled linguistically. You know, our whole body is, you know, it's kind of weird to explain, but our whole psychoneuroendocrine system works on metaphor. You know, it's sort of the thought and movement. It's all like charges. You know, if you think of it as, you know, a lot of people say energy and it sounds too woo, but ultimately the same signal that could control thought controls an action, a physical action, or controls sending off a hormone if it's in different parts of the body. So what they found ultimately with hypnosis is there are ways to provide someone with, they call them isomorphic metaphors. There's a way to provide someone with a metaphor or a way of thinking that once it's in their subconscious, it actually helps them access parts like regulating your blood pressure, regulating your blood flow, regulating your sleep cycle. So the main thing that I found with my clients for sleep, I use hypno. I have a lot of results with hypno. And it works because in some cases, what's keeping them from sleep is nightmares. A lot of times what's keeping them from sleep is a lack of a routine. And one of the approaches we use in hypno is sleep scripting, where you play the tape and the tape will walk you through. Go into the room, lie down, feel the coolness of your pillow, notice the coolness of your fan. And having someone tell you that, it's almost like I used to say during my depression, I used to play a lot of books. Having like maybe a 45-minute tape walk you through sleeping, it keeps your brain busy enough so that you're not ruminating. You're sleeping correctly. For a lot of us perfectionists. Yeah. And another thing I found with my clients is by managing nightmares, a lot of people who used to have nightmares suppress their dreams and suppress their sleep as well. So by allowing people to have a way of either becoming better at coping with their nightmares, or some people who don't dream, allowing them to actually dream and tolerate the dreaming, that helps sleep. You know, you can lead yourself to sleep with curiosity. I wonder what I'm going to dream, you know? So all these are things that they're subtle, but I found that by becoming more masterful in the realm of Ericksonian hypnosis, I get better results, and people know that they come to me for that. So when they come to me for like meds, usually I'll refer them to a colleague who's more adept at that.
Right. So I guess maybe we should back up a moment though, because when you say nightmares, I guess we haven't talked that much about PTSD. So that can be a real big reason why people maybe not sleeping well and maybe having nightmares because they're kind of reliving traumatic events.
Yeah.
So hypnosis can kind of help people break out of those cycles.
Absolutely. The power of hypnosis is it allows you to shift the subconscious associations in your mind. So one of the things that hypnosis is particularly effective for is trauma memories as well as phobias. You know, because ultimately what you have, your brain runs on triggers, you know, basically cues, outside cues. And a lot of people have unresolved emotions. And what happens with unresolved emotions is they come out of, they show up as if they were present. Resolved emotions show up as a memory. You know, you're like, if you're sitting here with me, you might notice that I remind you of someone that's irritating. You know, but you're able to differentiate me from that person and just give me my, you know, my own spoonfuls of irritation. The thing with trauma is one of the best examples is in trauma, there's rage instead of anger. So when someone makes you angry and triggers your anger, all the old anger, helplessness, basically all the times that you were angry before that you weren't able to do something about it, that you didn't get closure about, all the times you feel helpless, hopeless, overwhelmed, they all show up with that anger. That's the nature of PTSD and trauma, is that certain things never become memories. Like they never disappear. They always show up in the present. So with hypnosis, we're able to help people with their cues so that when the cues are activated, a person can still stay present. We call it the window of tolerance. Window of tolerance is how aroused you get over different cues, your threshold, and how you're able to bring yourself back, just coping mechanisms. And with PTSD, a lot of times you can apply CBT, EMDR, eye movement desensitization, reuptake, reprocessing, which ultimately is about providing someone with the ability and training to create these resourceful states, so that even as they're afraid, they have an ability to go back to a safe place.
Right.
Yeah. And so a lot of people with PTSD, you'll find that they spend most of their time in fight flight, in survival mode. So their cortisol spiking, testosterone, adrenaline. And so helping with getting the memories right allows them to regulate and less nightmares, because sleep is about processing emotions. So less nightmares, less flashbacks, less of uncertainty in the likelihood of being triggered. Less startle awakenings, lower startle response, lower hypervigilance. All these things come into play in your circadian rhythm and your overall quality of life. But definitely, yeah.
For sure, because, so first of all, that's really amazing that you were able to do that work with hypnosis. So I know last time you were on, you offered our listeners a trial of hypnosis, and
absolutely.
So drop the info real quick about that.
Absolutely. You can reach out to me. I use a Gmail, mani.saintvictor@gmail.com. And we'll use Health is Love Hypnosis. So if you put that in your subject line, Health is Love Hypnosis, I'll know that you caught us on this episode, and that's why you're there. And we'll give you a gift session. And it's amazing what one session can do. So definitely I'll offer that. Absolutely. So it's Mani Saint-Victor, mani.saintvictor@gmail.com. Just reach out, let me know where you heard about it, and I got something for you.
All right, awesome. And of course, when I post this on my socials, I'll tag you in the post, and your name will be spelled on the graphic as well. So awesome. If you have a hard time listening to people spell their name, then don't worry, we got you.
Yep.
So that's awesome, because so for me, fortunately, in my life, I've experienced some trauma, but I don't have a lot of traumas to the level of PTSD. So for me, just a little bit of acupuncture can be helpful. But I know a lot of people who just have experienced, a lot of just really terrible things in their lives that they may, the hypnosis I've learned about is a really good way for people to try to work through some of that trauma in their subconscious, because that's where it lives. It lives in their subconscious, and it's affecting
the body.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's interesting, because I went to a conference last week, and they were talking about obesity, not so much as a disease, but more of a social determinant of health, of people experiencing trauma of being labeled as fat, and all this diet culture and that sort of thing. And I'm sure a lot of them have just had trauma in their lives and have used food as a coping mechanism, but a lot of my patients who struggle with obesity are people who just have really heightened, activation of their pituitary glands and the cortisol.
That cortisol will do it.
Yep. Yeah. So I don't know how many studies that people have done as far as, trying to use obesity, work with hypnosis with obesity, of trying to figure out how to process some of it. Has there been any research on that?
Results. Yeah, there's definitely one of the things that has had a lot of success to the point of becoming a trend is the gastric hypnotic gastric band, lap band.
Oh.
What they found is you can hypnotize someone and take them to the process of a surgery experience, and then they're able to, your subconscious will do the same thing as if you have the band. So that's been in fashion for a while. Also, we're able to decrease food cravings. A lot of times we're able to find, for example, if the reason they're putting on weight is because they had something traumatic where they don't want to feel attractive. Like sometimes people, if they have some violation or some sexual trauma, they feel safer if they make themselves heavier, and there's other people who, as I mentioned, we think in metaphor. Some other people, they put the weight on, they feel more powerful, stronger. And some people even go so far as to consider it to be an armor. And then you have people who, like you said, the sugar, the eating process, they associate it with rituals, they associate it with childhood, they associate it with safety at home. that's even beyond the chemical aspects of eating.
Yeah.
So you look at all these different contexts, and each one hypnosis has a way of addressing. Anything emotionally related, you can address with hypnosis.
That's awesome. Yeah. Because so one of the things is, like I said at the beginning of this video, is that people market, all these medications. And so that was kind of what the point of the talk was. It was called like anti-fat bias, and how our society, like, doesn't like people who have larger bodies, who are considered fat and that sort of thing. And so how we're all just kind of brainwashed that we're all going to be a size 2, which is never going to happen. And but then we market all of these drugs to people like, oh, don't you want to lose weight? Yeah. But then like even the weight loss surgery, she was talking about the data, which I've seen personally. I've seen plenty of people do all of that, have the surgery, and then they gain the weight back.
Absolutely.
And then even now, like with all of these new medicines,
yeah,
exactly, they usually gain more back. And then with all of these new medicines, like they're all trendy right now, and they're selling tons of it to the point where they're sold out. Like people, like my diabetic patients can't even get the diabetes, injections, that sort of thing, because there are a bunch of people trying to lose them for weight loss. But the woman who was speaking, her name is Dr. Erlanger, so she's out in Washington, and she has a clinic, which maybe you should go work with her, about this. As far as she was saying that the data for even all of those medicines only goes about like 1 year. So people may be losing weight for a year, but they're going to gain that weight back. Yeah. So just the way our bodies are, and like I said, you haven't really addressed the reasons why they're overweight. And I'm sure a lot of it, there's a lot of reasons why. Sometimes people do have, because people try to say that food addiction isn't a real thing. It's like, people can be addicted to anything.
Yeah.
You could be addicted to anything. You could be addicted to sex. You could be like, why not? Why,
you got
dopamine.
Phone addiction that no one talks about.
Phone addiction.
Phone addiction and this social media addiction we don't talk about.
Exactly. So you can be addicted to anything, but so it's kind of an interesting thing, because she was just kind of like, from what I understood from it was just like, it sounded like we just haven't figured out how to effectively address obesity. Because for me as a geriatrician, I know that people who as they are aging, it's harder to age when you have a lot of extra weight on you, because it's really hard on your joints and everything. So, obviously we want to make our society more friendly for larger bodies and have different options for, because like I said, we're having a vow renewal this summer in June. And I was trying to find wedding dresses, because I didn't actually talk about this.
Congratulations on your renewal.
Thank you. Yeah. So we're having a 10-year vow renewal, and I've been trying to find a wedding dress, and I was trying to find something online because I don't really feel like going to a store and trying to do all of this. So I was trying to do, this one website, and they had try it at home, and the only size they had was a size 4. And I'm like, who is a size 4 in America? So one thing I didn't mention in this talk, because sleep and weight are closely linked, that's what I'm even talking about right now. But when I wasn't sleeping, I actually weighed, when we got married, which was in the height of my insomniac years, I probably weighed about 30 pounds less than I weigh right now. And when I look at myself from back then, I looked stressed and thin, like stressed thin. And nobody really ever asked me, are you okay, kind of thing? Because everybody was just like, oh, you look so amazing. You're so thin and that sort of thing. Yeah. But I'm like, I actually feel much better now, because that was one of the things that the person said. She's like, we have so much anti-fat bias. If I told you I would give you a pill that you would gain 20 pounds, but you would feel better, would you do it? And I was like, actually, that's already happened to me. I do, coming off of the hormones, I feel much better. I'm sleeping. I don't feel as irritable. I don't feel as unfocused. I felt like I was all over the place. My career was all over the place, and I was all over the place. So I'm like, I've already done that. And, people be like, oh, you gained weight. And I'll be like, I feel so much better. And I feel great at size 12. I could be a size 6.
Yeah.
So I do understand there's a lot of fat bias, and people have different bodies. I know that as a doctor, I know all my patients, a lot of them, I do the same thing. I eat mostly vegetarian. I exercise often, I sleep, and my size is my size, and it's been the same for the past 5 years since I came off of hormones, so I know there's not really a lot that you can really do to change it if you're at a functional weight. But I know that some people are not really feeling as functional as they want it to be. Yeah. So sometimes it can be but it's just if gastric bypass doesn't really help that much, and if these medicines are eventually, after they sell out and people start to gain the weight back, it's like, well, what will people have? And it sounds like hypnosis can be a good option.
Yeah. A lot of times when the other stuff doesn't work, we explore the root cause.
Right.
And it's not for everybody. You want to make sure you're not you've taken care of any medical conditions, like traditional medical conditions. But after you run through all those options, then ultimately you want to explore the root cause. You want to look at what symbolically the weight means to you.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Because it is an interesting thing. Like,
I
just know that food addiction is really a thing because my husband kind of struggles with it, and so his weight has been up and down a lot more than mine is. And he'll even say, like, yeah, I have a problem with food,
So I think that in our culture, everywhere a date is food, movie, popcorn, and whatever. You go to a skate rink, food. You go to the fair food. It's just everything is ritualized around usually unhealthy food. Thanksgiving,
right, exactly.
Fill your belly.
Right, exactly. And all the holidays, New Year's, all the drinking, all that sort of thing. And like what I just call destructive coping. Like in America, I just feel like we have so much destructive coping and so many destructive, things that don't contribute to our health in any way. And so it's hard because sometimes it's just like people talk about all of this sort of thing as far as like, obviously, like I said, I know that people have larger bodies and there's not a lot that people can do about it often, if they're feeling okay and functional. Like I feel okay and functional. I'm not trying to go back 30 pounds. Like I'm not trying to lose that 30 pounds. Like I'm good. But it's, sometimes the conversations become just weird, I feel like, in my opinion, because people, even this particular doctor, she was just talking about like trying to work on anti-fat which I'm like, you can do that. But if you consider obesity to be a social determinant of health, that's the same thing as high blood pressure and diabetes and all these sort of things. And I know that if I treat those things, I can lower people's risk for different problems, So it's just an interesting conversation because there is recognizing that there are things that we can do preventatively, but it's just kind of like, there's always going to be some level of people whose brains just think different. You know what I mean? I feel like as doctors, our brains think a certain way. We're kind of workaholics, we're kind of workaholics, anxious people, perfectionist people. And so people's brains work different. So there's always going to be people who think different and you're trying to help them live longer. Like for me as a family doctor and geriatrician, like my goal is to help people live longer and be functional, to be, 101 and functioning, that's my goal. And I know that people who are in larger bodies, especially, to the point of feeling like they're not functioning, a lot of them don't make it to 101. So like not even a discussion of function because a lot of them just do not live to be 101. So it's just an interesting discussion of trying to balance some of that, like, acceptance with trying to figure out, well, how do we actually treat these problems though? Because it's just like, you can't just be like, oh, we should just accept everybody, be as fat as they want to be. But it's just like, a lot of times people are that way because they're dealing with things and nobody's figured out how to help them,
Yeah, there's a lot of quiet suffering in our culture.
Yeah, for sure. With all types of things, with insomnia, like I said, because a lot of people don't ask about it, with, eating issues, with alcoholism, and even with drugs and marijuana. So I know we haven't talked about that yet, but for a lot of people, they will use marijuana as a way to sleep, to help with sleep as well. So, so can you talk a little bit about that? Like, will you talk with your patients about that?
I usually, again, I tell my clients go natural. At one point I was, at one point I was more into smoking and dealing with marijuana myself. And once I stopped, I became like, I tend to tell my clients to do what I do, because I'm doing the best I can. So I tell them like, it's not recommended, because what I found was even when we moved towards the whole CBD universe, what I found was I wasn't really getting good quality restful sleep. And also I would wake up in the middle of the night. And that was my experience. And from what I understand, ultimately, especially with the concentration of THC, CBD in our current culture, you're crushing your receptors at a certain point.
Yeah.
And we do have like the amount of THC in concentrated enough CBD and THC nowadays where you can create psychosis.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
motivating yourself. So ultimately it becomes self-medication. You
Right.
know, you always got to go back to the root cause. If you're going to be drinking yourself to sleep or smoking yourself to sleep or Benadryling yourself to sleep, you got to get to the root of it. You know,
Right.
that's why I always tell my people, I'm like, okay, let's see why you're doing that.
Right.
Let's see why you're doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just an interesting thing because a lot of people would consider like, marijuana natural and that sort of thing. It's just like alcohol is technically natural, and so is cocaine. And
Yeah.
one of my colleagues says, you know what else is natural? Syphilis.
Yeah. Yeah, it gets down to semantics. It's like, oh, ABC is natural. Yeah, it's not good for you. It's not great. It's
Right,
not good for
exactly.
you. We
You
can
know,
go back and forth and talk philosophies, politics. We can frame anything so that it sounds like there's a good reason for it.
right.
But ultimately, self-deception is a weakness. At some point, you gotta say to yourself, you know what? I'm doing this because I like it. I'm doing this because I'm addicted. I'm doing this to escape. You know,
Yeah.
and then a lot
And
of
I
times,
need some help. And I need help.
yeah, and then you gotta dig deeper and be like, I'm doing this and I'm doing more of it, and honestly, it's not helping. A lot of times we will continue to do things that don't work, waiting for it to eventually work.
Right.
And even though it's not working, we're afraid to stop doing it because we assume that if we stop, it'll get worse. I don't know if I explained that well. Like
No, I completely understand because that's why I talk about this idea of destructive coping, like constructive coping and destructive coping. Like in America, I just feel like we have so many examples of of destructive coping that a lot of people just never see examples of it. And it's more than that's just what they know.
Yeah.
It's not so much that they don't even really think, they don't even think about it. They don't even think about whether or not it's helping. And that's literally like so I have my new course is called 14-Day Coping Skills, but it's really from like part of my original book. I basically took like a few chapters and just made the course out of that because I felt like that was kind of like the most important part of it was basically just explaining how trauma and like the idea of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and how that affects your health, and how that's a lot of trauma that people are carrying around, and a lot of that is affecting their health, as we know. Yeah. As we've known for years, but a lot of people don't have no idea about that. Like the public doesn't know about that. So, but then I have like a list of different coping mechanisms, and it says, is it helpful or is it unhelpful?
Yeah.
And a lot of people never really process that. Like, are these coping skills that I have? First of all, they don't even realize that they're trying to cope. That's what they are. Like, they don't even realize, but that's what it is. And a lot of times they're getting into destructive / unhelpful coping mechanisms that are just not contributing anything to their lives in a way that is functional. For me, like I said, as a geriatrician, that's everything is just really just about functioning. And so there's just so many things that we do that help to make our body dysfunctional, like our sleep cycle is dysfunctional, our stomachs, our gut dysfunctional, our immune system is dysfunctional. So there's just a lot of different things that people are, like I said, usually just doing what they see other people around them doing. And that's part of why America is dysfunctional,
Yeah. Yeah. And if you watch the way the media conditions us, if you watch any type of show nowadays, every couple scenes, someone is pouring a drink. They drink to celebrate, they drink with dinner, they drink on dates, they drink when things go badly, they drink to help themselves think. And in each scene is just cues and reminders to use. And now, now with the legalization of marijuana, a lot of places, you get that, urban housewives, suburban housewives, all these different populations it's been blended in the music and the culture,
right.
And ultimately, just because it's common doesn't mean it's healthy.
Right.
We don't all have to, like I think it was a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, was the first time since they started tracking it that the life expectancy of Americans went down.
Yeah.
Years ago.
Mostly because of the heroin epidemic, opioid epidemic. Yeah. And that's the thing, like we're always like, chasing that dopamine. That dopamine chase is like really a lot of what America is about. And I often wonder, like, since I started going to acupuncture and working on that, because the thing about acupuncture that's interesting is that I've actually never been able to really meditate. And so I started going to acupuncture. I started going to acupuncture for fertility reasons when I was going through my cancer situation. So I wasn't going for that reason. But I found that it made me more in touch with my feelings.
Mhm.
and it makes you more expressive of your feelings and more expressive of your boundaries.
Yeah.
I'm like, nope, not doing that.
Yep.
So it's very interesting in that way of it really puts you back in touch with your natural state. And then after that, I started meditate. I took a meditation course because basically after that, after I became more in touch with my feelings, I started drinking more to numb my feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. That happened.
So it was hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I recognized I was drinking too much. And so then I got help in a non-traditional way of going to a meditation course and mindfulness course.
Yeah.
And that really helped me learn some other coping strategies. And that's kind of what really drove a lot of my business and what I talk about, because I know how important coping strategies really can be, and constructive coping strategies. And so then, I started meditating and I found that I was able to meditate better. I never really connected the two. Maybe it took me a little while to connect the two. So then when I'm going back to acupuncture now, like I get to this point where I can like float, and it feels like probably doing mushrooms or something. I don't know. I've never done mushrooms, but you get to this point like where your body knows how to release that dopamine. And I'm just like, a lot of people spend tons of money on all of these things, on drugs and alcohol and all that sort of thing. But it's just like, I wonder, like our body has ways to unlock those things.
Yep.
And then you look at like China and Japan and all these other cultures who have a lot of these other ways to unlock, those aspects of ourselves without it being in a destructive way.
Yeah. Yeah. But we want a pill for everything.
Right.
We want it right now in a hurry.
Right. Yeah. Because it takes time. Acupuncture, like you usually have to go a couple times it's like a commitment. Like I did probably initially when I first started going, I probably did like 20 treatments, but it's just an interesting thing about our culture and just what we'll pay money for, because, a lot of times I'll talk about acupuncture with my patients a lot, but they don't always go, because they say that, they can't afford it. Insurance has been a lot better about covering it. And then having access to the integrated medicine center at my job has been really helpful too. So there's, it's becoming more of a movement, but I'm just like, I wish I could really like do, like they had studies about, I'm like, I wish teenagers could get it. Cause teenagers, their hormones are all wonky. I'm just like, we need to start giving these teenagers some acupuncture.
Acupuncture and meditation for teenagers, and the studies they've done, they found it's very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying.
I'll leave you a little bit because I promised my kids that around 3:30.
We can wrap it up. We can talk about all this stuff all day, I'm sure. But so I feel like we've given the people a lot of really good information and different ways to work on their constructive coping skills, get them, and be more functional in the world. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise and having this conversation with me.
It's always a pleasure to talk with you. And remind your audience that they can reach me for their gift session at Mani, MANI, .Saint-Victor, SAINTVICTOR @gmail.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And I hope you stay well, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Wellness Wednesday. Eat well, think well, move well, sleep well. Wellness Wednesday.